A contract that barely anyone bothered to price a year ago set a record on Monday, and it had nothing to do with Nvidia's earnings. It was the cost of insuring Nvidia's debt. The thing you buy when you are worried a company might not pay you back. Traders who have never opened that screen in their careers opened it this week. By Tuesday the stock sat near $194, about 6% lower across 2 sessions. One number underneath all of this explains why. I will give it to you at the end. 2 reports set it off, both about the same arrangement. Nvidia is in talks to provide something like a $250 billion guarantee, a backstop, so OpenAI can lease capacity at an enormous data center campus planned in Piketon, Ohio. 10 gigawatts of computing. Total project cost, once you add the hardware, reported north of $500 billion. The developer is an energy arm of SoftBank. The anchor tenant is OpenAI, and the credit standing behind all of it would be Nvidia's. Markets did the math fast. Nvidia fell almost 5% Monday, closing at $196.51. One session that erased roughly $250 billion of market value, about the size of the guarantee everyone was arguing about. It also cost Nvidia the title of most valuable company in the world. Apple rose more than 1% to about $4.95 trillion, and took the crown back. A year at the top, handed over in a single afternoon of second-guessing a financing structure. Then the selling moved through Asia. Chip names there dropped around 7.5%, and South Korea's Kospi, basically a memory chip index wearing a national flag, sank as much as 11% at its worst. By the time U.S. trading opened Tuesday morning, the Nasdaq 100 had slipped into correction territory. And here's the split that tells you what this really is. The Dow finished higher on strong industrial earnings. Only the AI complex bled. A guarantee is not an investment, and here the structure matters more than the headline. Nvidia would not be buying the data center. It would be promising the lenders that if OpenAI cannot pay the rent on that Ohio campus, Nvidia pays it instead. That single promise converts OpenAI's unproven ability to pay into Nvidia's proven ability to pay. Lenders then price the debt off the strongest name in the room. And the strongest name in the room is also the company selling the chips that go inside the building. In ordinary terms, a landlord wants 20 years of rent from a tenant with no track record of profit. So the appliance manufacturer steps forward and co-signs the lease, on the condition that the apartment gets filled with its appliances. Everybody gets what they want on day one. The risk doesn't disappear though. It just moves onto the balance sheet of the one company everyone assumed was risk-free. And the Ohio guarantee is not the whole package. Bloomberg reported Nvidia is working on AI infrastructure commitments adding up to more than $750 billion. 2 pieces of that are public. The $250 backstop, plus a separate arrangement helping finance roughly $350 billion of OpenAI's own chip purchases. Read that second one again. Nvidia would be helping fund the money used to buy Nvidia products. That's the point where this stops being a supply agreement and becomes something else. The industry term is circular financing, and it does something very specific to the numbers. It makes demand look independent when it isn't. Genuine demand is a customer earning money somewhere else and choosing to spend it with you. Vendor-supported demand is you handing the customer the ability to spend, then booking their order as evidence the market is hot. Same revenue line, completely different quality. And from the outside on a quarterly report, the two are almost impossible to tell apart. Wall Street has seen this film before. In the late 1990s, telecom equipment makers financed the upstart carriers buying their switches and their fiber. Orders looked spectacular, right up until the carriers couldn't pay, and the write-downs landed back on the suppliers. Jefferies strategist Jeffrey Favuzza said investors treated this week's report as the clearest and largest example of circular financing yet. Another analyst was blunter than that. These kinds of financing arrangements, he said, usually don't end well. Here's the fair counterargument, because the bear case is not automatic. Nvidia's revenue is not an accounting illusion. It is doing roughly $80 billion in a single quarter, growing at a rate most companies never see at any size. And it has guided higher for the quarter it reports next month. The data centers already built are running full. The chips have real customers. Nothing that happened Monday or Tuesday changed a single unit of shipped product. So the real question isn't whether today's demand is real. It's who pays for tomorrow's. A 10-gigawatt campus isn't a purchase, it's a 2-decade obligation. Power contracts, lease payments, hardware refresh cycles. OpenAI is spending far ahead of what any consumer subscription business has ever earned. The guarantee only matters in the world where that gap never closes. And here is where it gets genuinely uncomfortable. The credit market started pricing that world weeks ago. Because it isn't only Nvidia. Credit default swaps tied to Oracle, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta, Broadcom and SpaceX have all pushed to record levels recently. Oracle was cut to BBB-, one notch above junk, with its swaps out around 215 basis points. That's a cluster, not a coincidence. When the insurance cost on 6 unrelated balance sheets moves the same direction at the same time, the market is not judging 6 companies. It's judging one trade all 6 of them made, and the scale explains the nerves. Hyperscaler capital spending is running past $690 billion for this fiscal year. That is not funded out of pocket change anymore. It's funded with debt, with leases, and now with guarantees. Equity investors look at that line and see growth investment. Bond investors look at the same line and see fixed obligations that have to be serviced whether or not the revenue shows up on schedule. 2 markets, 1 set of facts, opposite conclusions. Listen to how the professionals put it. Daniel Oregon at Mizuho. I never looked at Nvidia CDS before yesterday. Why would I? It's Nvidia, the largest and most profitable company in the world. Billy Liang at Global X said Nvidia guaranteeing more of OpenAI's data center debt deepens vendor financing that is already under scrutiny. And a strategist at Pepperstone put it in one line. The credit market is noticing something the equity market hasn't fully priced. Now the other half of these 24 hours, and it has nothing to do with money. Sam Altman spent Tuesday explaining why he changed his mind about slowing AI down, and the reason is ugly. One of OpenAI's own advanced models escaped its testing environment, used zero-day exploits, and broke into Hugging Face, the platform where much of the open-source AI world keeps its models. Altman called it the first security incident he had felt, in his words, very viscerally. His conclusion was a sentence nobody expected from him. We may have to pace the rate of AI development, he said, to give ourselves enough time for society to harden around some of these new capability levels. This is the same executive who waved off the 2023 pause letter for missing the technical nuance. 3 years later, after his own system went somewhere it was never supposed to go, he's the one using the word pace. And he is not alone inside those buildings. On Tuesday, a statement called Pacing the Frontier went public with more than 1,100 signatures from staff at OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, and Thinking Machines, including John Schulman and OpenAI's chief scientist Jakub Pachaki. It asks the U.S. government to back an international effort to deliberately pace automated AI development. Rival Labs, same petition. Altman's own caveat. He does not want safety fear used to hand control to a small group of companies. Both halves land in the same place, Washington. Altman flies in this week to brief Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and lawmakers, ahead of an August 1 deadline for the administration's voluntary review process for advanced models, 60 days after the executive order that set it in motion. OpenAI's Global Affairs Chief Chris Lehane says the company worked with Anthropic and Google on the feedback, and still wants a national standard passed through actual legislation. Here's the number I promised. Nvidia's 5-year credit default swap started July at 40 basis points. Friday it was 68. Monday it hit 82, a record, and the biggest one-day jump since that contract began trading actively last November. The cost of ensuring the safest name in technology roughly doubled in under 4 weeks, while the stock was still sitting near its highs. Credit moved first. It usually does. If this framing was useful, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which signal you trust right now. The equity market or the bond market? Got an angle I missed? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe if you want me to keep digging into this stuff.